Warning, this video is packed with information and will need your full attention. All the information you are about to hear has been cross-referenced by experts on the subject, which will be discussed in further detail in this video and also included in the description below. This video is the first of two. The first part is here on this channel, Aji Tfham. The second can be found on the Najib Al-Mukhtari channel. Let's begin.
Aji Tfham, ashnu famt?
Coronavirus in Morocco. The whole world is suffering from this pandemic. Economically, socially, psychologically, physically, politically, basically, every Ali-ending word has taken a hit. And for us Moroccans, forget about it. Being a country that relies on tourism, no need to dwell. Then add 2 years of drought, the situation is getting sour. We are suffocating. Even time seems to have slowed down to a complete stop. This is what we've been hearing over and over. For things to get back to normal, the pandemic needs to come to an end. For this, we need the vaccine, which the whole world is waiting for. So as we're waiting, a decree came upon us as a revelation, which states the vaccination process begins soon. Finally! Some were excited, others weren't. But seriously, how are we gonna get vaccinated before first world countries? Where does this vaccine come from? Are we guinea pigs? Did they use some type of black magic? Or do they want to implant microchips in our bodies? These were all questions that satisfied our team's appetite to work on the subject and deconstruct it to the bone. Ha ha ha! In the distant past, human nature calls for reproducing and spreading in the best way possible, until a contagion comes along and starts ruining lives. And if things get worse, the contagion's gonna start picking you off one by one and taking you to the grave. So society consequently thought of implementing either prevention strategies or treatment to avoid this predicament. We all know what medical treatment is. You get sick, you take your pills. Well, there are other ways of taking your medication. We don't have to get into details. On the other hand, prevention is avoiding the illness from the get-go. Like healthy eating habits, regular exercise. Hit the gym, bro! Avoiding crowds to prevent illness, or taking medication that will protect us from the disease, like vaccination. Vaccination is what provides active acquired immunity to a particular disease. In ancient times, taking medication that will prevent us from getting sick would be equivalent to magic. Whoa! How weird is that? The world before vaccines was filled with diseases we don't hear much about anymore. Diseases that plague millions worldwide. The World Health Organization estimates that vaccines annually prevent 3 million deaths. And for those of you who disagree with the use of vaccines for whatever reason, I invite you to watch the second part of the episode on Najib Mukhtari's channel. We dive into the subject with more detail. Listen carefully to it. Wear your thinking cap, then decide for yourself. By getting vaccinated, even if you have already been contaminated, you don't risk much. And more importantly, you won't be contaminating others even if you carry the pathogen. Isn't that amazing? Now your next question is, how can a vaccine stop a virus from making me ill and contaminating others? Good question. For you to understand, we need to discuss in further detail our immune system. Immunology is a complex science, and even the most esteemed scientists are clueless to certain aspects of the subject. We are going to shed some light on certain concepts concerning our topic of discussion for better understanding. To the experts and doctors out there, please be kind and considerate if we get anything wrong. If you've already seen our blood donation video, this will allow you to understand the subject in greater detail. There are different types of white blood cells, and each with a specific function in the body. They're always prepared to fight viruses, bacteria, and foreign invaders that threaten our health by producing antibodies specific to the antigen. Antigens are typically proteins on the surface of bacteria and viruses in general. We've already covered this in a previous episode. This is also present in all human cells and even other animals, each one specific to a virus, just like our fingerprints. The first type of white blood cells are specialists in recognizing a foreign intruder, thanks to the antigen's code. Whoa, you there! I don't recognize your antigens. Come here, let me talk to you for a minute. The bigger white blood cell swallows the foreign intruder whole. This kind of white blood cell really doesn't care. They are the first barrier of our immune system to fight off an invader. As first responders, they also send out signals alerting other cells to join the battle. All men to arms! We need backup! An intruder threat has been detected! It may take several days for the immune system to effectively respond. Oh gosh, it's proliferating! Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! After the first white blood cell devours the foreign agent, it breaks it apart, then copies its antigens onto its surface. This allows our immune cells to recognize and track the pathogen. These cells are called T lymphocyte and B lymphocyte blood cells. These cells are experts in dismantling the contagion. They use specific methods for dealing with the virus. Now listen up and pay attention closely. Going back to a previous episode, the immune system sends antibodies in the form of Y-shaped proteins that attach themselves to the foreign antigen until its complete destruction. Remember discussing this? Before reaching this stage, how can these antibodies recognize foreign invading microorganisms by specifically binding to a pathogen's proteins, facilitating their neutralization and destruction?
are large molecules composed of one or more chains of amino acid, meaning these amino acids lock onto each other to form different patterns. And different patterns can be combined to form different proteins. Are you still with me? Meaning, we can have millions of bacteria, each with its own specific antigen. How is this even possible? Does this mean I need a specific antigen for each germ in my body? Yo, dude, how many do I need? This is where the human body amazes. Even though T and B immune cells belong in the same category, T cells on one hand are produced in the millions, and each T cell differs from its sister cell with a unique receptor designed to attach itself to any foreign antigen entering the body. Basically, we have billions of T cells. Same thing goes for B cells. However, B cells are responsible of producing antibodies. Usually, they are both located in lymph nodes. Yes, lymph nodes. So pay attention. This is how it works. As soon as the cell bombards the virus, it rushes onto the lymph nodes. It already knows the shape of the virus as it displays a receptor on its surface which reveals the antigen.
Oh, hello. This is the antigen.
The initial interaction occurs in the T cell area of lymphoid tissue, where antigen-specific helper T cells and antigen-specific B cells are trapped as a consequence of binding antigen. My goodness, there are way too many T cells, each with its own receptor and particular antigen. There are way too many to keep track of. This is a time-consuming process. When an antigen binds to the T cell surface, it simulates the cell to divide and mature into a group of identical cells called clones. Some T cells go directly to the war zone. Others stay in the lymph node, while the rest search for B cells. When it gets there, it finds millions upon millions of different B cells carrying even more different receptors. This means there are more different antibodies inside you right now than there are people in this world. Finally, found it. This also turns the cell into an incredible antibody-making factory. As a result, lymph nodes start swelling, which is a sign that something is wrong in your body. When this happens, you might notice tenderness and pain under your armpit. After entering a lymph node, they then enter a lymphoid follicle where they multiply and divide, each producing a different antibody. B cells have receptors on their surface, which they use to bind to specific proteins, and each of us have billions of different kinds of antibodies. To the battlefield! They bind to viruses, marking them as invaders so that white blood cells can engulf and destroy them. And everyone is at it. The immune system is on full throttle, T cells are fully engaged, B cells are producing antibodies. Now that's what I call a party. They keep attacking the pathogen until there are none left. See? When the virus enters the body and antibodies are produced, a procedure that takes way too long, allowing the virus to multiply by the millions, ravaging everything in its path. Let's take SARS-CoV-2 as an example. It begins by reproducing in your respiratory tract and wreaking mayhem. By the time the body creates antibodies, the virus has already multiplied throughout your lungs. The patient starts suffocating. Oxygen levels diminish. Other bodily functions start breaking down. Oh my God, the patient is suffocating. He needs to be put in reanimation. Our immune system needs to address the symptoms. At the end, unfortunately, the patient ends up dying due to dangerously low levels of oxygen. This is why early detection is the best prevention. When you get sick, you take your meds, hindering the spread of the virus, giving enough time for your immune system to be ready and eliminate the virus. Capiche? Once the immune system has vanquished the invader, a large pool of memory T cells and B cells remain in our blood vessels. If the pathogen reappears during this period, the antibodies are ready to get rid of it on the spot. This is what is called short-term immune memory. The immune cells in our lymph nodes that have the same receptors as the virus have in turn multiplied and are stored away, only this time in larger numbers. These cells are referred to as long-term immune memory. In other words, even though the virus infiltrates the body again after the short-term immune memory cells have diminished, the long-term memory cells, being the first line of defense, know exactly where the virus is coming from. The process here occurs rapidly over and over. No time to waste. The immune response is quick and targeted. And consequently, the microbe finds itself very hard to spread. If you understand all of this, you understood 60% of the episode. You can chill, kick back, put your feet up, basically enjoy the time off. Now, how do vaccines work? A vaccine works by training the immune system to recognize and combat pathogens, either viruses or bacteria. To do this, antigens from the pathogen must be introduced into the body to trigger an immune response and train our T cells and B cells. This has to be done without infecting the patient when giving him the vaccine. It has to be safe and effective. Long story short, it's all about the antigen. As mentioned before, it's found on the surface of the virus or bacteria that causes the illness. Let me explain the difference between them. Bacteria is a living cell that needs to breathe and eat. Nom, 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 nom. Most of them multiply by a process called binary fission. If you come in contact with a harmful bacteria, they may reproduce in your body and release toxins that can damage your body's tissues and make you feel ill. As for viruses, they are surrounded by a lipid bilayer that contains viral proteins, usually including the proteins that enable the virus to bind to the host cells. Okay? Viruses rely on other cells to survive and reproduce. In other words, unlike bacteria, they don't need oxygen and nutrients to survive. They cannot function outside of a host organism, which is why they are often regarded as non-living. This virus is a real pain in you know what. So how do viruses reproduce? A virus can reproduce only by infecting a host cell, which has a nucleus that carries genetic material, a cell membrane, and receptors. Within this membrane, known as cytoplasm, is a water-based interior. This liquid environment is packed full of cellular machinery called ribosomes. They are in charge of protein synthesis from the cell's DNA. Don't get confused. DNA has two nucleotides, while RNA has a single nucleotide. Let me clarify. 2 strands and single strand. Are you following? What is the process? Just bear with me. This is simple. The nucleus contains the genetic material of the cell, which is found in DNA. Meaning, the code carries all the information on how living beings will look and function. In a fragment of this really long code, you will find the instructions needed to create a protein. And each time the cell needs its protein, it reaches out to the nucleus. But how are these proteins made? DNA never leaves the nucleus. Instead, it's transcribed into a single-chain RNA molecule, which then can travel out of the nucleus. Here it is. This is called messenger RNA. It is single-stranded. An mRNA molecule carries a portion of the DNA code to the ribosome for processing. Ribosomes are usually found free in the cytoplasm. Look at this guy. This guy is in charge of protein synthesis. Still following? We mentioned earlier proteins being made from thousands of smaller units called amino acids, right? However, there are certain amino acids the human body does not synthesize. These amino acids come from the nutrition we put into our body. It doesn't matter, never mind. Each type of amino acid has its own type of RNA. As you can see, U, C, G. This is the RNA coding. Specifically, messenger RNA carries the blueprint from a cell's DNA to its ribosomes. It then carries the appropriate amino acids into the ribosome for inclusion in the new protein. Here, you can see the first amino acid being created. Good job, man. A second one, a third one, a fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh one, eighth one, etc. It's an endless cycle. Assembly of amino acids in their correct order is the key to produce functional proteins. See what happens? Easy. The function of a protein is determined by its shape. The shape of a protein is determined by its primary structure. The sequence of amino acids in a protein is determined by the sequence of nucleotides in DNA encoding. When the virus is inside the cell, it will release the RNA and attack the nucleus. The coronavirus only has RNA, no DNA. In good faith, the ribosome, which functions similar to a factory, receives the order and produces copies of this virus. This same RNA code contains the information to construct the virus. The poor ribosome, working his butt off, not knowing that he's actually printing the defining components to a new virus which includes particular proteins and nucleic acids. The procedure keeps repeating itself until the cell is overwhelmed with copies of the virus. Moral of the story, ribosomes don't really think. They can't learn from their mistakes. When the host cell eventually becomes filled with viruses, pop! It bursts and frees up hundreds of viruses. These reproduced viruses literally take over the cells and undertake the same process. The sooner our immune system responds, the less chances for the virus to replicate. Actually, the amount of virus in an infected person's blood is referred to as the viral load. Much has been said about this during this pandemic. This is how COVID-19 brought suffering to our lives. And this is the difference between bacteria and viruses. Corona is a type of virus. So how do vaccines increase immunity by infecting the patient with the same virus without falling ill? To address this question, we have many options. First, the conventional method. The conventional method is divided in 2 approaches. It starts by studying the virus in all its form, to determine precisely what makes it lethal and strip it away, making it as cute as a PewDiePie and completely harmless. We administer the vaccine to healthy people who have never contracted the virus, or don't have immunity or immune memory against the virus. When this cutie pie virus comes into contact with the host cell, as mentioned before, it replicates and proliferates, harmlessly, giving our immune system the necessary time to fight it off. By initiating a response, producing antibodies, and developing an immune memory through T and B cells, this type of vaccine is the safest and most effective as it triggers our immune system and ensures outstanding immune memory response. Roughly speaking, it is just like when you contract the virus. However, in rare cases, the virus can regain its effectiveness even after being injected into the human body. I guess this might be why not everyone is being administered, particularly pregnant women. Clearly, it is the doctor who decides. In the second conventional method, we inactivate the virus, meaning it can't replicate. We inject large precise amounts in one dose. In fact, the vaccine containing the inactive version of the virus cannot proliferate. As soon as the immune system recognizes it, it simulates an immune response calling on T and B cells to produce neutralizing antibodies. Now, you possess an adaptive immunity. A drawback for inactivated vaccines is the several doses needed to be administered in order to get ongoing immunity against the virus. Hence, it does not stimulate the immune system like the first approach. These are the two conventional vaccines. On one hand, the downside of this technique is that it's very costly. Plus, the practice of virus breeding is common in the vaccine industry. It is mainly egg-derived and represents the attenuated form of the virus, which is then inactivated, a very time-consuming process, which in the business world, time is money. On the other hand, one of the strongest points of this technique is the successful use in many vaccines most of us received as children. Actually, the vaccine Morocco opted for is developed by Sinopharm and relies on the inactivated virus approach. This means the virus does not replicate inside the cell. It is dead. This is why an ongoing immunity needs 2 doses of the vaccine. The first one contains the attenuated form of the virus. The second is administered to strengthen your immunity. So are we done with the conventional ones? The second category worth exploring is the new generation of vaccines. So how did they do it? They used the genetic information that allows the virus to reproduce from RNA as explained before. This RNA gives instructions to our cells to make a harmless piece of what is called the antigen or spike protein. The spike protein is found on the surface of the virus that causes COVID-19. Does this mean they took the entire code to create the virus? Well, no. They used an unrelated virus, the viral vector, to deliver COVID genetic material, fuse it to a nanoparticle, which is an ultrafine metric unit. By the way, the term nano is a unit prefix and has nothing to do with electronics. It denotes a factor of 0.00000001. As soon as the instructions from mRNA are inside the immune cells, the cell's machinery uses them to make the protein. After the protein piece is made, the cell breaks down the instructions and gets rid of them. Here, the dumb ribosome we mentioned earlier starts to convert the genetic code into an amino acid sequence as the cell displays the protein on its surface. This process is carried out on many cells at the same time. Once the antigen breaks out of the cells, our immune system immediately sends out antibodies to the battlefield to fight off the virus. Yo, say, you came to the wrong neighborhood, bro. This response builds our immune memory. What makes this category of vaccines harmless is that you don't contract the virus at all. An example of use in humans was against the deadly Ebola virus. This is why they don't take risks in fear the virus could be reactivated. In addition, this is the faster method of developing a vaccine. In this case, no need for virus breeding. It is potentially paving the way for a vaccine that is more affordable. Nonetheless, when it comes to storage, distribution, and handling, this vaccine requires a stringent cold chain. In fact, these strict storage conditions are required for both Pfizer and Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. Now, I think we are familiar with the conventional procedure as well as the new generation of vaccines. Let's move on to the viral vector vaccine. What happens is they use an unrelated harmless virus that has been modified to act as a delivery system to carry genetic material that codes for a specific COVID protein. It is not the virus that causes COVID-19, but a different harmless one. For COVID viral vaccines, the vector will enter a cell in our body and use the cell's machinery to produce a harmless piece of the virus that causes COVID-19. The cell then displays the protein on its surface, and our immune system doesn't recognize it. This triggers our immune system to activate other immune cells to fight off what it thinks is an infection. Mission accomplished. The AstraZeneca vaccine uses this technology to protect against COVID. It is undoubtedly a well-established technology that does not reproduce the virus. But at the same time, it does not guarantee a strong immunity response, primarily because these virus particles contain only antigens. This is why we need a second dose after the first month, just like Sinopharm. So this is how different vaccines work. As seen previously, each has its pros and cons. Morocco opted for Sinopharm, who relies on the deactivated form of the pathogen, as well as AstraZeneca, which we discussed previously. Now the question is, how on earth is it possible to develop a vaccine in less than a year? To my knowledge, developing a vaccine could take 5 to 10 years. Is this a hoax? There are 6 general stages of development for a vaccine. This stage generally is the longest. It involves identifying antigens that could include virus-like particles. Weakened viruses, or bacteria. It's a mess. But in the case of COVID-19, fortunately, we had existing data on the structure genome and life cycle of this type of virus as it belongs to the family of the Coronaviridae. In the next stage, we do preclinical studies to see how effective the vaccine is at preventing the virus. This is where the candidates for the vaccine undergo careful investigation in the laboratory in order to assess its safety and ability to provoke an immune response, followed by trials carried out on animals in the third stage of the cycle. This is mainly to ensure any purification has not altered its identity and that it simulates the appropriate immune response. If everything goes well, the laboratory then refines their findings into a report presented to an ethics committee made up of an independent body of medical experts who approve the trials based on the results. The fourth stage marks the clinical trials, carried out on humans and conducted in 4 phases. During the first phase, also referred to as Phase 0, the goal is to study how the vaccine circulates in the human body, usually tested on 1 or 2 adults. These participants are carefully monitored in conditions that are carefully controlled. They study how the vaccine compound travels in our body from its injection to urination. The second phase attempts to assess the candidate vaccine in a small group of adults, usually between 20 and 80 subjects. Its main goal is to evaluate the safety of the candidate vaccine and to determine the type and extent of immune response that the vaccine provokes. Once the phase is deemed promising, trials will progress to the next stage, which is an expanded version of the first phase. But the numbers here could reach 500 participants. Its main objective is to evaluate safety, immune effect, and tolerance to different doses. If this phase goes well, we can start the third phase. This means candidate vaccines move on to larger trials involving tens of thousands of people. Through these phases, the vaccine needs to show it's safe, leads to a strong immune response, and provides effective protection against the virus. Given the number of subjects, certain rare side effects might surface in smaller groups tested in earlier phases. And if that's the case, the trial is suspended. Before progressing to regulatory approval, the laboratory runs according to a protocol. It is designed to certify the appropriate standards and measures. This protocol is usually published by competent authorities, like the website clinicaltrials.gov. Oh my god, trials. I feel like I'm going to become a doctor after this. Sometimes, after vaccination, the process of building immunity can cause symptoms such as mild fever or redness where the shot was given. And the protocol says if any adverse effects are identified again, the trial is suspended. And this is exactly what happened with Sinovac's trials that have been conducted in Brazil. A subject literally died during the tests. So they decided to stop the process until they found out the vaccine had nothing to do with his death. They concluded it was suicide. They decided to resume trials. The labs always keep in touch with their subjects, even in the thousands. It is imperative to follow up on them. They observe the participants, gather information in normal settings, and compare changes over time. After a successful phase, the vaccine developer presents a report reviewing all the information and data collected during trials, defining the vaccine's safety, purity, and potency. Then submits an application to the appropriate regulators respectively. Now we reach the 5th step, licensing and approval. Just so you know, every country approves a vaccine separately. In Morocco, the government body in charge of licensing is the Department of Medication and Pharmaceuticals, DMP. In the US, it's known as the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. Just so you know, the World Health Organization does not approve the labeling of vaccines. The WHO provides recommendations and advice, and each country holds the final decision, either to approve or not. Generally, before regulatory approval, the department inspects all the animals used in the preclinical studies, reviews all the submitted reports, and also reaches out to the subjects who participated in the trials. This step in itself is very time-consuming. After licensing, we progress to the 6th step, where the vaccine is distributed and used in the millions. Meanwhile, the vaccine developer as well as the departments in charge keep a close eye on any severe cases that could be generated. If that's the case, they withdraw permanently from the program. This is more common in drugs than in vaccines. Many drugs have been withdrawn from the market following this process, relative to the risk on patients. And if by any chance an alternative drug treats the same disease more efficiently than the first one, it'll be discarded. This happens quite often. These are the 6 steps a vaccine needs to go through. The current vaccines governments are working on are still in step 5. And I believe the use of a vaccine before licensing is nothing short of a public health hazard. In this case, licensing relies on the preliminary results of the 3rd phase. Why preliminary? Because it usually takes time. And countries can't afford to wait. For licensing, we don't have time anymore. People are dying. COVID vaccines were developed in a record time, not only because of the availability of previous collected information, but also a lot of dinero has been invested to speed up the process. Normally, the vaccine developer only moves to the next phase until they're sure they are not losing money, meaning they consider all indicators before kicking off trials. Trials are very costly. As for COVID, many governments are pouring money into the vaccine initiatives. We need help. The economy is collapsing. Now, we can finally talk about Morocco, the moment you've all been waiting for. The vaccines we opted for in Morocco targeted 2 manufacturers, China's Sinopharm and the UK's AstraZeneca. Sinopharm vaccines used a weakened, attenuated, or deactivated form of the pathogen. As stated before, it is a well-established technology, a tried and proven method. A major bottleneck is it's costly compared to other vaccines. I think one dose costs $140. AstraZeneca uses the viral vector-based vaccines that use the genetic material to produce a specific viral protein. This technology is cheaper. Up until now, both vaccines are in the 3rd phase of the clinical trials. Regarding Sinopharm, 54,600 subjects from the UAE, Peru, Argentina, and Morocco took part in these trials. Actually, China didn't participate in the 3rd phase of the trial, simply because they managed successfully to control the virus. This has made difficult for China to include its subjects to the trial for lack of successful crisis management, simply because they managed to successfully control the virus. In other words, they have no new cases to include in the trials. And to accelerate the process, they decided to perform trials on patients 18 and up, due to the low numbers of infections and deaths in younger generations. In the UAE, 45,000 participants took part in the 3rd phase. Morocco engaged with 600. According to the international press, China's Sinopharm already administered the vaccine to millions of subjects. This means laboratories in China benefited from an emergency license so they can start selling the vaccine. The UAE also approved and started vaccinations. We all saw the pictures of the Emirati prince receiving his shots. Lately, the Emirati Ministry of Health announced that China's COVID vaccine from Sinopharm is 86% effective. In August, Russia's laboratories approved emergency licensing to begin COVID-19 vaccinations and sales. We've come to know this vaccine as Sputnik 5. They didn't even take time to reach the 3rd phase. By the end of the 2nd phase, the vaccine was already licensed. Oh my God, the Russians! Vladimir Putin, the Emperor of Russia! Concerning AstraZeneca, clinical trials took place in South Africa, Brazil, and the US, and involved 40,000 candidates 18 years of age and up. An early analysis of the data from late-stage clinical trials suggests AstraZeneca's vaccine is 90% effective. 90% is a relatively high efficacy rate. The FDA considers a 50% effectiveness in order to issue an emergency license. Currently, AstraZeneca developer is reconducting trials to confirm the efficacy of the vaccine before manufacturing and distribution. Just so you know, no country has issued an emergency licensing for AstraZeneca. In Morocco, for instance, the DMP still hasn't authorized any of the vaccines. Basically, the DMP didn't receive any application of the above-mentioned companies or laboratories. However, emergency licensing will surely be granted to both vaccines and give the go-ahead to a COVID vaccination campaign to flatten the curve on severe cases and deaths. Follow me? Keep this in mind. The end result of the national vaccine plan is to lower infections and deaths nationally. So pay close attention. This isn't rocket science. Follow me? You will need to get 2 shots of the vaccine to enable a strong immune memory. The spacing between the 2 doses is 1 month in general. During this period, you are not completely protected against the virus. So you really need to take care of yourself and be mindful of the risks. During clinical trials, the vaccine was administered 7 days after the shot to see how the body would react. And do you know what they found out? They discovered results vary from patient to patient. Interesting, no? This is why we need to maintain a healthy lifestyle and do what's right for our body. A balanced diet combined with adequate exercise builds up and boosts your immune system. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean you are immune against COVID either. You need to take into account safety measures. Take the second shot, wait for at least a week, then we can evaluate your immune response in case you contract COVID-19. And generally, if you're infected after vaccination, the patient in this case, you, won't show any symptoms. Therefore, it is unlikely that anyone vaccinated will experience severe respiratory illness requiring special treatment or intensive care. You know the deal. To flatten the curve, Morocco offers these vaccines to those at higher risk. This includes frontline health workers, police, elderly, and those who have previous medical conditions. In order to contain and get rid of the virus, at least 2/3 of the population must be vaccinated, so they can form a shield against the virus and prevent viral transmission. In case one of them is infected, his immune system will respond subsequently, as we explained before. Most importantly, it will stop vaccinated people from infecting others. Isn't this amazing? It's almost magic. The probability that the subject experiences severe symptoms is practically null. Wow, look at all these colors. I love this change. That is why we must vaccinate 2/3 of the population. It's a real challenge. The government says it'll take 3 months or more for such an operation. Alternatively, some experts claim this is way too short and very difficult to achieve this goal. Once the rollout begins and the first vaccine is given, it'll be the largest ever vaccination drive in Morocco. Morocco announced it will acquire China's Sinopharm vaccine, which approximately costs $140, in addition to Britain's AstraZeneca at $30. I'm not sure about the pricing, as I haven't found any sources to confirm this. For the sake of more transparency, the government has to share this information with the public, especially if they plan to launch a free vaccination campaign. I believe the CNSS and the CNOPS will bear all expenses of their beneficiaries. Is COVID vaccination likely to become seasonal, similar to influenza? There are two determining factors: the nature of the virus, as well as its immune memory. Influenza viruses constantly change through a process called antigenic drift. These mutations can lead to changes on the surface of the proteins in the virus. There are different flu viruses circulating, so the vaccine's composition is always reviewed each year and updated, meaning you would have to take the updated version as well. What happens here is the flu virus can mutate, and when the antibodies confront a virus whose surface structure they don't recognize, they can't fight it. This is why we need a conventional flu vaccine every year, created by inactivating a pathogen. You know the story. Studies suggest mutations are rare in the coronavirus strain. Experts in Morocco raised the question, will China's Sinopharm vaccine deliver? Is this also going to work in Morocco? Well, I think we gathered a bunch of questions here. Did the antigen mutate before Morocco received the vaccine from China? To address this question, they published research that proved the antigen used by Sinopharm is similar to the one in Morocco. Thanks to this publication, Morocco took the decision to enroll in the clinical trials. Besides, Morocco is making plans to export the vaccine to African countries by producing them locally in the city of Tangier. So to answer the previous question, we won't be needing a vaccination every year, as the coronavirus rarely mutates. However, we don't know how long the immune memory will last. Activating T and B cells. Monsif Slaoui claims only one shot is needed, once every 5 years, to boost our immunity. The question to ask here is, why are we taking risks, knowing we can be patient and do things right at the right moment? Experts say if we consider the pros and cons of the options, vaccination is the best preventative treatment. In life, it is recommended that all individuals on this earth weigh all their options and calculate the risk to reward before making any life-threatening decisions. As you step out of your home to go to work, there's always a risk of you getting hit by a car. But at the same time, work is important. You get over the fact that you are going to get hit by a car in favor of going to work and making some money. The same logic is followed by experts. Currently, the situation is a disaster. Severe cases of death are rising exponentially. In addition to this, the economy received a major blow because of all of the social distancing measures and the decrease of traffic flow between cities. During a state of emergency, each passing day is costing 1 billion dirhams to our gross domestic product. The only thing about the vaccine that is worrying is the third phase of the clinical trials not being completed. But I am confident the rewards outweigh the risks, and more lives will be saved. Each day we lose 40 to 80 innocent souls. Imagine how many of us will put their lives at risk if we have to wait until clinical trials end, and the massive shock the economy will endure. Whereas if they grant the authorization promptly, we are likely to escape the worst, as there is no risk-taking, because Morocco took part in Sinopharm's clinical trials, monitored the phase closely, and has no doubt about the results. Actually, 1 million Chinese has already been injected with the same vaccine. In the UAE, 45,000 subjects have been given an experimental COVID vaccine. USA, Canada, England, Saudi Arabia all approved the vaccine. China, UAE, Russia, and Bahrain already kicked off the vaccination campaign. Well, this is the official version of the story. For those who have reservations about their decision, they say there is no transparency in the process. Morocco chose China's Sinopharm, who is developing 2 vaccines, one in collaboration with Beijing University and the other with Wuhan University. The one approved and used by the UAE is Beijing University's vaccine. And they said the vaccine was 86% effective, according to interim results of its phase 3 trials. On the other hand, Morocco, along with Peru, enrolled in the Wuhan University's trials. It is the Emirati Health Ministry who shared the trial results rather than Sinopharm. In fact, we don't have the slightest idea about this vaccine. Moreover, they still need to publish clinical trial. Before licensing, the DMP needs to know which 2 of the vaccines we inject, Wuhan or Beijing. The DMP needs to publish a comprehensive report with all the collected data from all the trials, just like the FDA and Pfizer. This is how it's done in normal circumstances. Before getting the ball rolling, they need to share all the details with everyone. Meanwhile, leave the floor to the professionals and scientists to motivate hesitant population groups to vaccinate. In response to this, Moroccan decision makers argue they are not relying just on Sinopharm, but also AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca published their preliminary trials. It was flawless and was the first to publish reviewed efficacy results. However, Morocco is still targeting Pfizer. It's not an easy task to get right. Don't forget, they just started production. Only wealthy enough nations are guaranteed their shares of the vaccine. The World Health Organization says third world countries only get their vaccine after the first half of 2021. Morocco intensified diplomatic efforts in the sense that they win the race and be one of the first nations to roll out the vaccine. The question is, will they establish a mandatory vaccination policy? I don't think so, but they will most likely enforce a COVID ID for access to stadiums, swimming pools, and schools. This means that we will be subject to restrictions. Actually, it will be mandatory. Another point here is this a conspiracy to drug the population? To reply, a state depends on its people. And if you have watched the episode where I addressed debt of Morocco, you will know that state revenue comes mainly from active taxpayers. Logically speaking, if they take the risk of drugging the population, they will be shooting themselves in the foot and will limp into a systematic crisis, threatening the whole state's extinction. This is what happens in principle. Manufacturing vaccines is highly complex and is carefully monitored, as you saw. At the end, the labs may or may not approve. No country will be forced to buy it, because when you submit your application to regulatory bodies, all clinical trials data are thoroughly reviewed. Now, 2 frequently asked questions. First, do vaccines contain toxins? And second, is it feasible to inject microchips in the shape of a molecule into vaccines? Bearing in mind that a molecule is a group of atoms. You will find out the response to these questions in the second part of the episode on Najib Mokhtari's channel. He is a great storyteller and goes into more detail. I encourage you to follow him. This is it. I'm sorry I took so much of your time, but I hope you make the most out of this. Like my page on Facebook. I usually stream live on Facebook with competent authorities. I would like to thank my team, researchers, editors, graphic designers, and sound designers. Thank you so much for helping me create this video. And leave us a feedback. It is important to us. If you enjoyed the video, like it and share it with your homies. Hit the subscribe button, and thank you. Salam.